Welcome. I'm Irma Russell, the Dean of the Law School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Good afternoon. The Honorable Attorney General Eric Holder, U.S. Attorney Mike Cotter, University of Montana officials, President Royce Engstrom, Provost Perry Brown, Executive Vice President Jim Foley, Judge Haddon, Judge Malloy, Judge Sandstrom, Justice Cotter, State and District Court judges, Montana Attorney General Steve Bullock, State Auditor Monica Linden, colleagues, students, and friends. It is a pleasure to have you here on this occasion. And we are delighted to be able to present again this outstanding lecture series, the William B. Jones and Edward A. Tam Judicial Lecture. This year marks our 11th lecture, which this year is entitled Justice Through Service, Extending America's Greatest Tradition. I extend a warm welcome to each of you to join us for this special event, and also to join us for the kickoff of our celebration of our centennial year. Montana formed a law school 100 years ago this month, and we're delighted to have this sort of event to begin marking that special occasion. I'd like to say a few words about the history of the judges that this lecture series honors. Judge William B. Jones and Judge Edward Tam were both from Montana. We have been presenting a range of interesting and topical presentations in a series that was designed to engage students, faculty, lawyers, and judges in discussions and greater understanding about our judicial system and the justice system in the United States. The lecture series honors the memory of two distinguished jurists who left their mark on the federal judiciary by establishing themselves as committed to improving the quality of justice. In addition to handling demanding caseloads, both judges fully participated in the life of the law. They were active speaking and writing on issues of great importance to the judiciary and to the public. In short, these two judges provide us with models of the judicial life worthy of emulation. And as you will see in your program, they had very strong ties to Montana. We honor these judges and our continued commitment to service in this lecture series. By their service, these two judges provide models of America's greatest tradition, the Attorney General's topic and message to us today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Bob Bennett. Bob is a long-standing, faithful friend of the university and of the law school. This event exists because of Bob Bennett's vision. Mr. Bennett is a partner in the firm of Hogan Lovells, a member of the investigations White Collar and Fraud Practice Group. He's a former federal prosecutor and an exceptional trial lawyer. He's handled numerous high-profile cases, including his representation of former President Clinton and of Judith Miller in the investigation of the CIA leak. He is one of the nation's most influential and successful litigators, and the author of a book I recommend to you, In the Ring, The Trials of a Washington Lawyer. He received his BA and LLB from Georgetown his LLM from Harvard Law School. He is admitted to practice in Virginia, New York, D.C., and Montana. Last May, the university conferred its highest honor on Mr. Bennett, an honorary doctorate sponsored by the law school. Just a little bit of the history of how this lecture series is linked to Mr. Bennett. While serving on University of Montana School of Law Board of Visitors, Mr. Bennett suggested to Dean Eck that the law school sponsor a lecture series in honor of Judges Jones and Tam. Over the years, the series has brought many distinguished lecturers, including the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, 4 other Supreme Court justices, the Solicitor General of the United States, and the Director of the FBI. Despite his many accomplishments, Bob remains modest and down to earth. In fact, he made me take out some comments I had in this introduction. To illustrate, I remember reading in his book, he was once accused of trophy hunting by a critic, and he responded by stating the only trophy he wanted was a big brown trout from the Yellowstone River. Please join me in welcoming Bob Bennett to introduce the Attorney General.
Thank you, Dean, for that very generous introduction. Eric H. Holder, Jr. was born in New York City and attended public schools there, graduating from Stuyvesant High School before earning his BA degree in American History from Columbia College in 1973 and a Doctor of Jurisprudence from Columbia Law School in 1976. Upon his graduation from law school, Mr. Holder joined the Department of Justice through the Attorney General's Honor Program. He was assigned to the newly formed Public Integrity Section, where he investigated and prosecuted corruption involving officials in local, state, and federal government. In 1988, President Reagan appointed Mr. Holder to serve as an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia, where he presided over hundreds of criminal and civil trials during his years on the bench. In 1993, President Clinton appointed Judge Holder to serve as the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, and in 1997, President Clinton appointed him to serve as Deputy Attorney General of the United States, a position that he held until the end of the Clinton administration. At the request of President George W. Bush, Mr. Holder served as Acting Attorney General in 2001, pending the confirmation of Attorney General Ashcroft. In July of 2001, Mr. Holder joined the Washington, D.C. law firm of Covington and Burling as a partner in the firm's litigation practice, where he represented clients in complex civil and criminal cases, as well as internal corporate investigations. President Barack Obama nominated Mr. Holder to be Attorney General, and his nomination was confirmed by the United States Senate on February 2, 2009. Mr. Holder began his service as Attorney General the very next day. He is an active part of our community. He's received numerous awards in recognition of his professional and civic contributions. He lives in Washington, D.C. with his wife, Dr. Sharon Malone, and their 3 children. Now, all of this I just gave you, you can find in publications. So I just want to close on a personal note. I've known the Attorney General for approximately 25 years. I know he looks a lot younger than I do. When in private practice, we worked on the same side of issues. And when he was U.S. Attorney, we were adversaries. I can tell you that this very, very exceptionally talented man is a man of unimpeachable honor and integrity. And I truly believe that the people of the United States are fortunate to have Eric Holder as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States. Thank you.
I have to come to Montana more often. I haven't said a word, and I've already gotten a standing ovation. I probably ought to leave now, you know. It is a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you so much, Bob, for that wonderful introduction. Bob has known me quite well over the last 25 years, and when he got off kind of the kind of pro forma part of the introduction and started to get into the personal, I was thinking, uh-oh, where's he going to go with this? Because he knows a lot about me that could be quite embarrassing, but he was very charitable. It's an honor, Bob, to join you and to be among so many distinguished leaders and members of Montana's bench and bar, including the judges who are here with us today and with whom I will be meeting, I guess, after the address, including our United States Attorney, Mike Cotter, Attorney General Steve Bullock, and also President Engstrom. I want to thank you so much for your hospitality. As Bob mentioned, the two of us have been friends for a long time. Not only is he one of our nation's best and wisest counselors, he's also an enthusiastic ambassador for the University of Montana and its School of Law. And let me assure you, he never misses an opportunity to champion this school's extraordinary students and alumni and its unique and dynamic approach to legal education. Now, of course, much of the credit goes to Dean Russell and her team of administrators, faculty, and staff. I want to thank her for inviting me and welcoming me to this beautiful campus. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to do something that I think every attorney, and certainly every attorney general, regularly should, and that's to consider how our system of justice can be strengthened, how our founding promise of justice can be fulfilled, and how the challenges before us can be overcome through public service. Now, in the spirit of Judge William Jones and Judge Edward Tam, the visionary namesakes of this lecture series, that's exactly what I think today is really all about. Taking a step back from what we do and what we study to consider what it is that we owe to our community, to our country, and to our fellow citizens. Now, both Judges Jones and Tam dedicated their lives to public service, and both, I must point out, also worked for the United States Department of Justice early in their careers. A great place for all of you young lawyers to think about when you start thinking about where you want to start your careers. I am very proud to join you in honoring their legacies, and I'm delighted to help kick off your celebration of the University of Montana's Law School's centennial anniversary. For the last 100 years, this school has been a place of learning, a place of contribution, of practical application, as well as intellectual rigor, of public policy study, and of public service opportunities. I'm pleased that your school practices a philosophy of people-oriented law and ensures that there are so many clinical opportunities. Given the culture of cooperation and not competition that has come to define this campus, I trust that your next century will be marked both by exponential progress and the caliber of achievement that has defined its first 100 years. Well, today let us dedicate ourselves to that and to your future, just as we are here to celebrate the past. But first, in the spirit of anniversaries and of rededications, let us consider a place 2,000 miles east of Missoula, the city that I've just come from, Washington, D.C., and a different time. 1961, a half-century ago. It was the beginning of a new era, and on January 21st of that year, our 64th Attorney General and my most famous predecessor took the oath of office. He was only 35 years old, and his name was Robert Francis Kennedy. In recent weeks, as the Justice Department prepared to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Robert Kennedy's swearing in, I've been thinking a great deal about that moment and the extraordinary years of ballot drives, of freedom rides, of integrating schools and civil rights breakthroughs that soon followed it. In 1962, Attorney General Kennedy said to the American people, and I quote, "In a democratic society, the glory of justice and the majesty of law are created not just by the Constitution, nor the courts, nor by the officers of the law, nor by the lawyers, but by the men and women who constitute our society, who are the protectors of the law as they are themselves protected by the law," unquote. Now, consider that idea for a moment. It's a big one. The glory of justice does not lie only in our legal code or our judicial system. And the chance to advance and bring about justice is not restricted only to those with 3 years of legal training or stellar grades or an enviable job. Every one of us as citizens of this great nation has the opportunity and has the obligation to protect the promise of justice. And every student in this room has all the tools necessary to help bring justice to those in need. Now, I have seen the power of this ideal and of the activism and commitment of young people at every stage of my life and at every stage of my career. And it is evident throughout our nation's history. In fact, this may be America's oldest and perhaps finest tradition. Since our nation's earliest days, young people, and specifically young lawyers, have been using their knowledge and using their training to stand up for justice. Generations of young attorneys have found that their education not only armed them with an ability to change the law, it also empowered them and provided them with the power to change the world. Our best example of this may be our earliest example, the development of our nation's Constitution. Though it's widely accepted that the key framers of the Constitution were the wise old men of the Republic, the truth is that the greatest legal document in the history of mankind was actually established at the insistence of and through the advocacy of young people. Those who supported the Constitution, the Federalists, were on average at least a decade younger than their opposition. Now, this history underscores a trend that we've seen time and time again in every chapter of America's story. Many of the great social advancements in our nation's history were, in no small part, the result of the ideas that young attorneys and advocates envisioned and worked to implement. This is evident whether you're looking at the eradication of slavery, the birth of the women's suffrage movement and the passage of the 19th Amendment, or the conception and the creation of our civil rights laws. Today, as in 1911, when this law school was founded, in 1961, when Robert Kennedy began his historic tenure as Attorney General, this state and our entire nation face both unprecedented threats and unforeseen opportunities. We also face the choice of a new century, a choice between a future of service and a future of apathy. Will we continue our nation's long and noble commitment to the pursuit of justice, no matter how difficult or consequential the sacrifices involved? Will we roll up our sleeves, seek out those in need and at risk, and take the steps necessary to generate change? Will we exhibit the grit and the ingenuity to build, to innovate, to create new opportunities for others? Will we demonstrate the irrepressible tenacity, the boundless optimism that characterized the generations that preceded us and extended our nation's greatest traditions? Those are the questions that I think we face at the beginning of the 21st century. Well, today I call on each of you to choose action, to choose compassion, and to choose a future of service, the service of justice. Here in Missoula, it may be easy to feel removed from Washington, D.C., and from the work of our nation's Justice Department. But you all can, and you all must be partners in the work that we are doing at the Justice Department. You should also know, just as surely as I do, that the Justice Department cannot fulfill its critical responsibilities without the engagement and the commitment of students and future leaders like yourselves, both here in Montana and across the country. Now, of course, there are many examples of Montanans venturing out from the state and this campus to make a difference nationwide. And one of my personal favorites is Jeanette Rankin, who grew up on a ranch only a few miles from the University of Montana and graduated from this university in 1902 with a degree in biology. She was the first female member of the United States Congress, struggling for women's rights and for peace, when many women were still not allowed to vote. Now, this tradition of service and of extraordinary achievement is now yours to carry forward. This is an extraordinary moment, an extraordinary time to learn, to live, and to make powerful differences for your fellow citizens through the law or through whatever field you choose to study and to follow. So I hope that each of you looks for ways to serve others, and by doing so, to serve the cause of justice. Not only do you have the ability to create the change and progress that you hope to see, you also have the responsibility. Whether you eventually lead movements, decide cases from the bench, return to the classroom to teach, run for office, advise clients, defend the accused, you can and you will define the future. You may choose to offer input into how our nation is going to combat crime, protect our national security, strengthen our education system, safeguard the environment, or ensure that all Americans have the opportunity to access legal services. But each of you can find ways to call our country to aim higher, to become better, and to do more for the most vulnerable among us. As I look out at all of you, I am reminded of a question that was penned by the poet Alfred Lord Tennyson, a question that nearly half a century ago, Attorney General Kennedy copied into his personal diary, and I quote again, "What shall I be at 50? Should nature keep me alive? If I find the world so bitter when I am but 25. You must be optimistic. You must be hopeful. Like me, you stand high on the shoulders of those who have come before you, Judges Jones and Tam, Congresswoman Rankin, Attorney General Kennedy, and so many others. And while you are the beneficiaries of their commitment and their contributions, you are also stewards of our nation's progress. America's glory and its majesty are now in your hands. So know that I am counting on you. Your nation is counting on you. And as you celebrate 100 years of excellence, know that history is counting on you as well. Thank you very much.
The Attorney General has been kind enough to agree to answer some questions. And
Only easy ones.
well, I'll start with the easy ones. How's that? In 1976, you went into the Justice Department. Why did you do that? And tell us what the department was like then.
I've always been a pretty, I think, idealistic person, and it seemed to me that the Justice Department was a place where I could both practice law and practice my idealism. I went into a part of the department called the Public Integrity Section that prosecuted corrupt government officials, and it seemed to me that that was the best part of the criminal law, the most interesting part of the criminal law, in the sense that those people who had been given the most, certainly given the trust of the public and who had done things in an inappropriate way, were the ones who deserved to be looked at, deserved to be prosecuted. And so I thought that it was a nice marriage of an interest that I had in the criminal law, the idealistic side of me, and plus I wanted to get out of New York City for a couple of years. I intended to stay in Washington for only 2 to 3 years, get back to the center of the universe, which at that time in my mind was New York City, and I never made it back.
How was the department different then than it is now?
I think the thing that really defines the department now, that makes it fundamentally different from the way it was before then and even up to 2001, is the emphasis that we now have on national security matters. I spend I would bet 60, 70% of my time on national security issues. And one of the things I've tried to do coming back to the department is to make sure that we continue to be involved in that way and to that degree, but also do the things that the department has traditionally been responsible for, protecting the environment, civil rights laws, criminal enforcement of our domestic laws. And so what I find myself doing is trying to extend the day, because there's really not enough time to not do the national security things and do all of these other things. So I think that's the way in which the department has really is different. We are much more a part of the national security apparatus than I think the department was before.
Now, you've been a private practitioner, you've been a judge, you've been Attorney General. Before that, you were a United States Attorney. What's the best job you've ever had of all those?
That's an easy question, and it almost sounds like I can't hold a job. Being the U.S. Attorney in D.C. was by far the best job that I ever had. The U.S. Attorney in D.C., being a U.S. Attorney, as I'm sure Mike will tell you, is the best job you can have, but being the U.S. Attorney in D.C. is unique in that you have the responsibility for prosecuting not only federal crimes, but the local crimes as well. There's no district attorney in Washington, so the office is the largest one in the country for that reason. And so you have on your plate everything from common misdemeanors to the most complicated white-collar crimes. And it was fascinating to be able to interact with the people of Washington, to reconnect the office to the citizens that it served, while also doing the things that the U.S. Attorney, a U.S. Attorney traditionally does. I loved that job. I loved that job.
You know, you encouraged the younger people to think about going into the Justice Department or U.S. Attorney, and I remember recently there was a group of the old Lions together, all of whom had been prosecutors, and many of them had gone on to great things, and judges and all sorts of things like yourself. And every person said the best job they ever had is when they were a federal prosecutor, and myself included. If I'm correct, you have a brother who is a retired law enforcement, William. What did he do?
He was he's a retired sergeant from the Port Authority, lieutenant, a retired lieutenant at the Port Authority in New York. It's an interesting police force that is responsible for airport security, for the bridges and tunnels that go between New York and New Jersey. I used to kid him. He met his wife, who was a flight attendant at the time, for, I guess, a now defunct airline. And I think that he spent a good portion of his time, I'm sure, doing his job. But I think a good portion of his time also checking out the flight attendants as they were coming in, one of whom he married. But he's a cool guy. He's been retired. He now owns a string of McDonald's restaurants. So if you've ever been at the U.S. Air Terminal at LaGuardia Airport, tell him that you know Billy's brother, that's me, and ask for some free fries.
What motivated this family interest in law enforcement?
It's interesting. Billy and I have talked about that. I'm not sure what it is. You certainly couldn't have predicted, looking at me in the late 70s, early 70s at Columbia College, a time of great ferment in this nation, and certainly on Columbia's campus in particular, that I would be a federal prosecutor or a person who would be in law enforcement. And knowing my brother and all the crazy things that he did growing up, the notion that he would have been a cop would have been something I would not have predicted either. So I'm not sure exactly what happened. It's certainly not genetic. My father was a great human being and a wonderful dad. Didn't always stay on the appropriate side of the line, and I'm not going to go any further than that. And so maybe it's a reaction formation or something. I'm not sure exactly how it happened.
General, I was going to say, what is your typical day like? But I know there's no typical day. But could you sort of talk a little bit about what your day is like? I mean...
Yeah, it's interesting. Every day is different, and yet there are a few things that are pretty constant. When I'm in Washington, I start my day by getting into an armored vehicle. That's another reality with my details here with me, some of the guys. we start off in a 2-car or a 2 SUV caravan, and they give me what's called a putter, which is some kind of thing with a lock on it. You pull out the latest intel that I read, and then at 8:30 I meet with the FBI director, and we go over the threat stream for the past 24 hours. So if I wake up in a good mood, and I'm feeling, that I look pretty good hair day, my wife's not mad at me, my kids have done their homework, I bound out into the SUV and I read the stuff that comes out of the putter. It's a bit of a downer. And by the time I'm finished with my meeting with Bob Mueller, usually about 30, 45 minutes after it starts, I'm in a pretty foul mood. Because you have in that the combined intelligence from the CIA, various defense intelligence agencies, the FBI, and really telling you what's going on in the world and who's trying to do our nation harm, our people harm, American interests abroad or here harm. And it's very sobering. And it's reassuring in the sense that one of the things I think the Bush administration deserves a lot of credit for is that they put in place great mechanisms for detecting threats. And we are the beneficiaries that I think we built upon that. But it's sobering always and alarming at times.
You have to behave yourself with all these guys watching you all the time, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's funny, I talked to the president about that. I just had a birthday party, and it was my 35th. And
That's right. He's telling the truth.
I thought I was going to like Montana. And we were talking about what do you like least about your job, and I think Bill O'Reilly asked him the same question. And he told O'Reilly what he told me, which was that it's tough being in the bubble. Now, my bubble's not nearly as big or as thick as his is, but, and I like, the guys who, and the women who are on my security detail. We have a lot of fun. But the inability to go to a movie by yourself, I mean, if I went to the movies last week and saw Black Swan. Who's seen Black Swan? A little different than what I expected, but anyway, Natalie Portman.
Now ask about True Grit.
All right, who's seen True Grit?
These are Montagnans, look at that.
There we go. But the Washington Examiner reported that a piece that was sent to me, Attorney General Eric Holder was seen at the movies, at the AMC 8 or something like that. He was seen in the restroom with his detail. And I was thinking, wait a minute. It'd be one thing to say I was at the movies and I was seeing Black Swan. The thrust of the report was that I was in the restroom with one of my detail. Okay, so that's an example of the bubble and how it affects your life, which is not play. I like to drive, and I haven't driven a car. The agents don't think I've driven a car for a long time.
From what I understand, that's a good thing, General.
That's what my wife says.
General, what is the most challenging part of your job?
Trying to balance the need to keep the American people secure, safe, and making sure we do so in a way that's consistent with the values that have defined this nation as great and which makes this nation unique. There are shortcuts that you could take, and I am bound and determined not to do that. That our Constitution means something, the sacrifices of people, and when I went to Normandy, I was struck by the huge number of graves that I saw there. Young men and women who gave their lives for the idea, the concept of this country. And you get a lot of pressure from a lot of different places to cut corners, to do things that I believe, as I said, are inconsistent with who we are and who we should be as Americans. And trying to not only do the work, but push back on that pressure makes this job at this time, I think, particularly difficult.
I can't think of an attorney general who is better prepared for the position than you. I mean, you were a private practitioner, you were a judge, you were a federal prosecutor, U.S. attorney, a deputy attorney general. And yet, when you became Attorney General, was there anything that surprised you? Anything that you said, gee, I didn't really figure this would be on my plate or something?
Well, you know what's interesting, Bob, I think is that one thing I didn't realize is that people really listen to what the Attorney General says. It's not they listen to Eric Holder. They listen to whoever the occupant of that office is. And in a way that I was not listened to as Deputy Attorney General. And so that all my remarks, certainly those when you have cameras or people taking notes from newspapers, somehow get reported, get listened to, sometimes not accurately. I'm sure the reporter here is taking them down all accurately. But that really kind of amazed me. And so I have to be a little more guarded, a little more calculating, I think, in how I express myself than the freewheeling person that I think I tend to be. And Matt Miller is here with me. He's the Office of Public Affairs. I think I'm probably his biggest nightmare. So that's been something that has really kind of surprised me, just the attention that the office gets. I mean, you know, walking down the street in Washington, people are always coming up to me. People want to take pictures all the time, which is all fine. But again, it's something that I just didn't expect.
Let me ask you a few specific questions beyond, I think the things you've been asked and answered are what people are really interested in, what is the job like, but why has it been so difficult to close Guantanamo Bay?
Yeah, it's something that we've spent a lot of time working on, and I think one of the things is that people have to understand that we've had successes. When we got there were about 240 people in Guantanamo. There are now about 170 or so. We have categorized every one of the people in Guantanamo and placed them in categories. Those who can be repatriated, moved to other countries, those who should be tried in Article III courts or military commissions, and those who will be held under the laws of war. A not insubstantial accomplishment. But closing Guantanamo has proven to be difficult because we've not been able to try cases where I wanted to try them. We've had difficulties in getting Congress to cooperate with us as part of the Defense Authorization Act that was just passed in the last session. There's a restriction on the use of federal funds to move anybody out of Guantanamo. The whole question of closing Guantanamo has become a very big political issue, one that I think should not be, because all the intelligence tells us that Guantanamo serves as a recruiting tool for al-Qaeda. It serves as a divisive thing between the United States and some of its closest allies. And we would be better served by closing that facility, which has a symbolic significance around the world. But it has just been difficult for those reasons.
General, 62% or something very close to that of the people in Montana have voted for the compassionate legalization of medical marijuana. What is the department's position on that?
Yeah, I made the determination early on that in those states that had passed such laws, that we would not use the scarce federal resources that we have in going after people using marijuana in a way that was consistent with those laws, to treat chronic illnesses, to relieve pain from life-ending illnesses, but made clear that we were not going to allow those laws to be used in a way to cover activity that was clearly criminal in nature, where people were using those laws to traffic in marijuana, which is the crop that brings the greatest amount of money to the Mexican cartels, and which has done damage, harm to many communities in this country as well as many individuals. So I thought we struck the right balance in saying that if you follow state law and use it for those medical reasons, we are not going to use our resources, scarce resources, to go after you. On the other hand, if you use that as an excuse to do that which people have been doing for long periods of time, we're going to make an example of you. We are going to use our federal prosecutors and investigators to come after you.
Another very controversial issue out here is, and I'm going to advise you as a friend not to answer this question, is...
But he's going to ask it anyway.
the wolves are eating the elk, and do you have a position on that?
No.
No.
See, unlike somebody else who we were talking about earlier, I will always follow the advice of Bob Bennett. I can tell the story. He represented a very prominent congressman at one point when I was the United States Attorney, and we were adversaries, and we were in the process of trying to work out a plea negotiation, a plea deal. And Bob struck what I thought was a fair deal, and one that I was willing to accept. The congressman thought that the deal was not anywhere close to that which he wanted. He and Bob had some parting of the ways, I don't know exactly. Another lawyer came in, another very good lawyer came in, and this congressman ended up with a sentence that was 3 times longer than that which Bob had worked out. That sticks in my mind. And so when Bob tells me not to answer that question, I don't answer the question.
I have one more question, and by the way, on behalf of everyone here, I join the president and the dean. You are so incredibly busy, and for you to have flown out this morning and spent time with us is very much appreciated. My final question is not one that can be answered very easily, but it is this. I think the American people rightly expect the Attorney General to be a person of independence and honor and integrity and call it the way he sees it or she sees it, which you have a reputation for. But at the same time, you are a political person. You are a member of the cabinet, which people often forget. You are a part of the president's team. How do you balance those things? There have to be tensions. How do you balance those things?
That's a really good question. We first off have a president in Barack Obama who is a good lawyer and who understands the value of an independent Justice Department. And though I am a friend of his, an early supporter, and his Attorney General, and serve in his cabinet, in the cabinet, I'm fourth in line of succession, which is pretty scary. There has to be, the Justice Department is different from Department of Energy, Defense Department. I don't serve as the head of the department, as the Department of, your typical cabinet agency. We have to make decisions based only on the facts and on the law, and we have to do so independent of the political considerations that might frame decisions that are made by other cabinet agencies. And there's a tension. The things that I might decide to do are perhaps not appreciated by people on the other side of the aisle, but interestingly enough, are not sometimes appreciated by people who I meet with on, a regular basis and who are, my closest political allies, my friends, including the guy who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I've done a couple of things that I know that he's not been happy with, but I think he respects the fact that given my responsibilities as Attorney General, it is my job to do these things independent of those political considerations. And so, I've looked back over history, and it seems to me that those people who are considered the great attorneys general are the ones who have had the ability to do that. It'll be for history to decide whether I've been successful at that, but that is certainly something that I have tried to stress with the people who work in the department, and it is certainly something that I try to constantly remind myself that I can't give in to political pressure, whether it comes from those people within the executive branch with whom I serve and serve proudly, or it comes from perhaps from the opposition party. My job is really just to call them as I see them and use the facts and the law, the Constitution, and our great traditions as my guides.
General, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have just very brief closing remarks. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank again our speakers, Attorney General Holder, Mr. Bennett, and to thank them not only for information we've learned by listening to them, but also for insights and really also for inspiration. That's one of the greatest things that we can do and we can experience in light of our commitment to service. I'd like to say a special thanks to Judge Shandstrom and to Judge Malloy for their work on Jonestown. I'd like to also thank our development director, John Mudd. I think John is here. He's out getting the detail ready. And also our director of external events, Carla Caballero Jackson, and program assistant Holly Coolish, who have worked tirelessly on this event. I want to thank you all for coming and experiencing this unique opportunity to hear from our nation's leading lawyer and enforcement official. And I hope to see you at future events, and I hope the Attorney General will come back to Montana.